All right, we're here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday. Josh Doring, Chris Brown in the correct boxes on the overlay. They are here with me. Gentlemen, how you doing on a Friday morning?
Well, we come in here after a rather slow sports news week, and J.J. Watt is no longer used to Texan.
It's crazy what happens when you clearly have no interest in putting wins in the win column for your football team, and you alienate essentially your top 6 quarterback in the NFL within your own organization. And then all of a sudden your other stars, he's, will you just let me leave, please? I don't want to be here anymore. I mean, it's right, it's not like JJ Watt. I mean, right, he's had some injuries and had some trouble staying on the field super consistently, but we're to the point with the Texans where having somebody like that on your team is pointless. And pointless for JJ Watt because he's not, I mean, if he were to complete his career as a Texan, he would never play in another meaningful football game. I don't think that's especially if Deshaun Watson gets traded as we all expect him to be traded at some point, unless they stumble into something they didn't mean to stumble into.
Right. And it would be because of Deshaun Watson more than anybody else.
Right. It would be, Deshaun Watson, and then they get they get a wide receiver in the first round who turns into a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL really fast. But I mean, they clearly don't seem all that interested in doing that. Deshaun Watson doesn't seem to be interested in being there, and so neither does J.J. Watt, who I'm assuming, would like to go play in another meaningful football game, and that's just not happening in Houston anytime soon.
And a competent organization too.
Sure, I mean that as well, but a competent organization surely helps, but also JJ Watt cares a lot more about what's happening on the field than whatever's happening in the front office. The two are typically connected, but at least if I was a player, I'd be more worried about what's happening on the field than what's happening in the front office. But the two are, of course, connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder. It's just reacting to this. I'm just wondering what the fallout of this is going to be. I mean, or nothing. I mean, what the narrative becomes. I mean, obviously there's what's next for him, but for the Texans, where this goes. I mean, not that it's. I mean, it makes sense, even though it's a huge surprise. It makes sense, like you said. It's just I'm curious now. Right, where do you go from here? How does that affect the Deshaun Watson situation? If at all, their mindset. I mean, because it's. I mean, there's how it should affect them, or how they should be playing it, and then there's how it's actually going to affect them. And I don't even know how we could even begin to, venture a guess. It's kind of tricky, just because there's such an unpredictable situation at this point.
Right, because if you take them at their word and based on their actions, they have insisted they're not trading Watson and then just let Watt leave. Mm-hmm. Those two things don't connect.
Add up. Yeah.
Right.
It's not like they're going to go use this J.J. Watt money and the fact that they're not paying him like the player he is to go make their team better. And there's a price to pay for releasing somebody. So that's the other interesting part of this to me is, like you said, Chris, who knows? It's not like we can take them at their word for anything. But this seems to be in direct contrast to the line that they've held with Watson, which is he's not going anywhere, even though he clearly wants to go somewhere because both these guys are fed up being treated the way that they've been treated in Houston.
Do you think, because, right, if I was in Watt's situation, that's a question I'm asking before I'm asking to be released is, all right, you be straight up with me. I've been here for, like he said in his little message, I've been here for a long time, and at the very, if nothing else, I deserve for you to be transparent with me. And regardless of what, I know what you're saying to the media and to the fans, that you're not letting Deshaun Watson, that Deshaun Watson's not going anywhere. it kind of looks like that's bullcrap. I need you to be straight up with me in because right there's every reason to believe that a team with Deshaun Watson on it, if they make the right decisions with Deshaun Watson, that can be a playoff football team.
Right. They're
Right.
just never that far away.
Right. Exactly. It's like, it's like any team that has any NBA team that has Steph Curry on it, right? Even if they're bad. I mean, we're talking about Steph Curry makes that big of a difference as we saw last year, and then this year with a relatively competent basketball team, the Warriors are right back in the mix in the playoffs. And Deshaun Watson always puts you right there, right? Even on a horrible football team without any of his weapons, he still was the leader in almost every single important passing category in the NFL this year. And so the talent is there, right? And it only takes a few difference making players and improving the edges to be, especially in the AFC. I guess the AFC South right now is a pretty good conference. It's a pretty good division. But the point is that I find it hard to imagine that that JJ Watt is straight up asking to be released if he thinks that Deshaun Watson is still going to be there. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be completely wrong, but at least if I was in his situation, that's a question I'm asking, and it's a lot easier. It's a lot harder to make the decision that JJ Watt just made if Deshaun Watson and a quarterback of that level is still going to be on that roster.
At the very least, it says something about the vibe he was getting and his confidence level that that's going to be the case. Right, because it could say, can you promise Deshaun's going to be here? No, okay, I'm out. It could be that, right? We don't know exactly what happened during these meetings, but yeah, it's an absolutely valid point that it just, again, points to the direction the Texans seem to be heading, and this idea that Deshaun Watson doesn't really seem interested in ever suiting up for them again, whatever that ends up looking like.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rest of the show today, we're going to do the podium right in the middle of the show. The podium of our favorite, not the best, but our favorite Super Bowls of all time. Two came to my mind immediately and had to do some soul searching for the third one, but we'll do that in the middle of the show. Best and most interesting of the weekend, and then we'll get out of here on a Friday. But we're going to start with Humor Me Please. If you're new to 110 Daily, you might not have seen Humor Me Please before, but Humor Me Please is essentially, hey, I want to talk about this. You're going to have to sit here and listen to me talk about this. Like you say before, humor me please. Humor me please while I talk about this thing that I might care about way more than you care about, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So that's how this works. Gentlemen, very nice manners. Humor me please. That's all I ask. That's all I ask is that we use good manners during this segment. But Josh, we'll start with you. What's on your mind today?
Oh, I got a lot on my mind.
Oh, man.
Humor me, please, when we talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars hiring Chris Doyle as their director of sports performance. You might remember Chris Doyle was the guy at the core of all of the Iowa allegations who got fired. It was not Kirk Ferentz, of course, the head coach overseeing this, but a lot of the complaints were lodged specifically at Doyle. And he lost his job because of it.
Oh, right. He was their strength coach.
Right.
Yeah.
Strength and conditioning coach. Right. Mm-hmm. The guy sort of, if you read all of the details, most, according to the players and the people bringing forth these allegations, the guy most responsible for this culture.
Mm-hmm.
Urban Meyer has now put him in charge of an NFL sports performance department. He's in charge of everything, strength and conditioning, nutrition, all that stuff. Urban Meyer said he was vetted thoroughly, but basically gave no justification other than he's confident it won't be a problem. It came across as, I know what he did and I just don't care. Because in my head, if you're going to hire this dude, the first thing you're going to have to do to convince me that there's any kind of morality behind this hire is to come out and say, look, here's what happened. Here is specifically why I still feel comfortable with this guy. And I don't believe that this is a reflection of who he is. And here's sort of the explanation and justification for all of this. Urban Meyer gave none of that. He just said, I'm confident it's not going to be a problem. Which then brings...
Go ahead. Sorry. I thought you're done. My bad. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I got more.
Okay.
Which then gets to the other part of this, which is, this is the biggest question I have about Urban Meyer in the NFL. You don't have control over the entire program the way you do in college. You don't have control over your players the way you do in college. If he's bringing this dude in, why in the world would Jaguars players take this guy seriously? Why in the world would they want to work with him? What does this say about their head coach that he just brought this guy in? Right? It's a different world in the NFL. They're not going to put up with this. College, you sort of have to because you're on scholarship and it's just a different dynamic. That is not the world you're living in the NFL. Head coaches are not CEOs. As much input and leverage and cachet as Urban Meyer has. And then finally to Urban Meyer himself. Stuff like this makes it impossible, or he's doing his best at least to make it impossible to write off his past transgressions as honest mistakes. One of my closest friends in the world is a diehard Ohio State fan. He can tell you 3 deep at every position on that roster. It's incredible, his knowledge. He and I were talking about this a little while ago. And I asked him specifically about Urban Meyer because I think it's a fascinating conversation, and I don't know what to make of him because I want to believe he tries to do things the right way and that there's just some errors in judgment there. And basically what my friend said, his sort of comprehension and his read on the situation was that Urban Meyer had good intentions, but just put too much faith and loyalty in people, specifically with Zach Smith. He made a really good point, which was, look, there is no reason you should be going to bat for your wide receivers coach who's not even particularly good at his job, even if you believe he's innocent. At that point, just from a purely PR organizational standpoint, it's just not worth it. And yet Urban Meyer still went to bat for Zach Smith. Aside from the morality of course, what Zach Smith did was awful and all of that stuff. But even just from a best interest of Ohio State, it's just not worth it. It's not. And he still decided to make that. And so now you go do something like this and hire this guy right after he got fired by Iowa for creating a culture where Black players in particular did not feel safe or respected or valued, and just kind of brushed the whole thing off and was very sort of dismissive of this idea that this is a problem when he got pressed on it. This is just another indication that I have again, goes back to this idea of benefit of the doubt. And I just have no interest in giving Urban Meyer the benefit of the doubt anymore when he's going to voluntarily do stuff like this.
Well, and here's because you're not, you not being you in particular, but people are naive if they think that character actually outweighs performance at whatever spot we're talking about. You're naive
Right.
if you think that, right? I mean, people care about the performance in your position or on the football field way more than they care about. I mean, Tyreek Hill Tyreek Hill has done horrible things, but he's praised because of how fast he is and how good of a wide receiver he is. But he shouldn't.
Which goes to the Zach Smith point of he's not even that good at his job from what my friend said. So it's just not even worth it. Right. It's not like the positives are outweighing these awful negatives.
And the same can be, and that's exactly where I was going with Doyle too. Mm-hmm. He sent 13 players to the hospital following team workouts. If anything, among everything else, there's an argument that at the foundation of a strength and conditioning coach is you push these guys as much as they can be pushed without putting them in danger, right? That you're towing the line, between the workouts and the nutrition and the recovery and the, advanced training techniques, whatever it might be. At the core of it is to find the way to get the best out of our guys without actually doing things that put them in danger. But sending, players having to go to the hospital as a result of workouts also screams to me that you're not very good at your job. You should know the line, and you should, at the very least, be able to see when your players are are not can't handle what you're asking them to handle anymore. Whether it's an entire workout program or a specific workout on a specific day. That's the other part of this, because that's exactly where I was getting. It's not like, and it's not like Doyle's ever been the director of athlete performance at Iowa. I mean, he was the strength and conditioning coach, yes, but it's not like there just isn't a whole lot of reason to your point with Zach Smith as well. It's not like there's an overwhelming resume that he can say, listen, this guy is the absolute best at what he does, and that's why we hire. Because to be honest with you, that would suffice enough for a lot of people if Urban Meyer said this is the best guy for the job, and show them the resume, and they'd be them being fans and media to a certain extent. But there's just not being at one place for 20 years is impressive, and you doing something right at least. But Doyle was doing a lot of stuff wrong, and he wasn't doing enough right and overwhelming you with a resume that it's impossible to go anywhere else.
It's also strength and conditioning.
Yeah, sure.
And sports performance. Not that it's not important, but you can't tell me that there are not other qualified people that don't come with this baggage.
Right. That's also the nature of the position, right? I mean, it's not a head coach position, right? Yeah.
Right. This is not your superstar wide receiver, quarterback, whatever. Because we're going to get cynical about it. Yeah, there's a cost benefit analysis to it. But you just voluntarily hired this dude when there was no reason to. It just makes it really hard to believe anything he has ever said about all of the coaching cliches and the culture stuff. And I loved his book. His book is one of my favorite books I have ever read. I can't sit here and say he backs any of it up because he's just going against everything he supposedly stands for with stuff like this.
Yeah, I just can't believe. Part of me is just, I guess I can't. I don't want to say I'm in disbelief about it, but part of me is just sort of blown away by the fact that he thinks his explanation is enough.
Right.
That he just thinks saying, yeah, a lot of hard questions. This is a quote. A lot of hard questions asked. A lot of vetting involved with our staff. We did a very good job vetting on that one.
Right.
Okay, that's he thinks that's enough. Like, oh, okay. Well, he says they vetted really well. What does that mean? This is not a situation where that is anywhere near enough. And I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that he would think that way, but it is still just sort of just like you think. I mean, there are going to be people who like you said that is enough for, but just the idea that overall from a PR standpoint, from a just morality, logic, anything standpoint, that's just enough for people to just be like, oh, okay, well, I trust they vetted on its own. Like it's not enough. I mean, I don't know.
That's all I had.
Right. It's the most. I can't say I was surprised. I mean,
no.
Right. I mean, there was still some room to give Urban Meyer the benefit of the doubt. Depending on who you talk to, some might think there was more room for that than others, but I can't say it didn't. Right. It's a sort of a validation or an invalidation, depending on how you look at it, of the things that Urban Meyer has said in the past about learning from mistakes, or if it was just a missed judgment call, whatever. Because, I mean, there is no way to spin it when it comes to this guy other than I don't care about his past. That is what Urban Meyer is saying by asking him to sign on the dotted line. Is that I don't really care what you've done in the past. And the point you made at the very beginning, which I think is one of the best points, is that if I'm a football player for the Jacksonville Jaguars, why would I want to be in the same room as that guy? I've got no reason to be in the same room as that guy. Regardless of how good you think he is, Urban Meyer, you have to present somebody that like you need your players to go to war for that guy. Because when your players will go to war for that guy, they'll work really, really hard for that guy and be invested in what that guy is telling them to do. And there's no reason to do that with Chris Doyle. So, it's a good one. It's a good humor me, please. Chris,
Mhm.
what you got? Good manners, please.
Yes, of course. Humor me, please. Mine this week, it's not nearly as serious. It's not that in depth or anything. But well, first I have like a little like a bonus humor me here at the top, just something that just got my attention. It's just funny. It's just a light thing. So yesterday, I think it was yesterday, might have been 2 days ago. I think it was yesterday. Wendy's tweeted out. We all know Wendy's has a spicy Twitter account.
Yep.
This was
Um,
great.
Yes, Wendy's tweeted out time for everyone's favorite made up social media holiday. It's National Roast Day. Like right now, drop a roast me below and feel the burn. And the Tampa Bay Rays responded, said, go ahead, Wendy, absolutely roast us. Keep it spicy like your nugs. And Wendy's responded, we're surprised you didn't pull your social media manager in the middle of writing that great tweet. So,
That is, excuse me, that is incredible. I mean, right? There's nobody who deserves a raise more than whoever runs the Wendy's social media account.
mhm,
But it's just another notch in the column because when you said that the Rays responded, that was like, oh, it's got to have something to do with the fact that they're the cheapest. They're the cheapest franchise in the history of sports, except maybe the Cleveland Indians. That is phenomenal and spot on. I would love to know what the process is for, right, because there's no telling the different types of companies and people that are going to respond to that tweet. So like it's
mhm,
completely fair
right.
that whoever the social media manager is had no idea that the Rays are just notorious for never spending money.
Mhm.
So I would love to see what that conversation's like. Is there like a focus group? Are there like 12 people sitting around a table for the day and like this is
Yeah,
your job
and
for the day is to
John
respond
Right,
to
does.
these
right.
tweets?
Oh, you
Right.
got okay. You got the sports ones. All right, the Rays
Right. John knows the
responded. We
sports one.
Right.
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 And
Mhm.
I also love that. I appreciate the fact that Blake Snell also saw it,
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
he very much appreciated the very clear hint
Mhm.
toward him.
Hmm.
That's too funny. That's great. I
Yes.
like that. I
Yes.
like that one as well.
Yes. So that's my mini humor me. My bigger point, which it's kind of a bigger, longer point, but I'm gonna make it quick. A shorter version of it is like it's just another time for me to point out the hypocrisy, if you will, of Major League Baseball, of the league of Major League Baseball, of the commissioner's office, and some things that are going on.
No.
Yeah, I know it's
Rob
crazy.
Manfred is a little two-faced?
I
No.
know, I know. It's not that big of a thing. It's just something that just annoys me. So the league announced on Tuesday the health and safety protocols for the 2021 season. That's not the bad part. That's not that obviously you want to have health and safety protocols. Um, and so there are some changes that they're going to have that are going to be based off of things that like the NBA have done with the contact tracing devices that players are going to have to wear at the ballpark and other different measures. So that it seems like they're making some adjustments from what they've learned from other leagues and what they learned from last season. Um, but there are also some things that are returning, some actual rules changes that are going to be back that are considered health and safety measures that they put in place last year, like the runner on second base and extra innings and 7 inning double headers. And those are their own thing, and whether you like them or not, but those are actual rules changes that were put in place last year. And the rationale for it last year was because of the special nature of the 2020 season. Like we need to have not have super long games. We need to, you know, keep people healthy because of all the other circumstances of the season. So they do that. They bring back those rules. But the one rule that they don't bring back is the universal DH because, of course, they don't want to do that. It's a negotiation thing. But it's just so it's was considered a health and safety measure last year, the universal DH. And now they're bringing all these rules back because they say they're health and safety measures, except for the one that they want to wait to use as a bargaining chip. It's like it's kind of it also the universal DH is more of a health and safety measure now than it would have been last year because you have pitchers who haven't hit in 18 months who are gonna be asked to go from pitching 40 innings to 200 innings. They're gonna
Mhm.
have to bat. It's more of a health and safety issue now than it was then. It's just like it's not that big of a thing. It's just sort of something that gets on my nerves because they're like, oh, we got to bring back these rules changes because they're health and safety related. But you're not gonna. You said this was health and safety related last year. What changed? Well, what changed is now you want to use it as a
Yeah.
bargaining chip, and it's like it's kind of makes it really obvious what you're like. If it wasn't already obvious enough what they're doing, it's not that big a thing. It just annoys me.
And it's also there's an unfortunate line that runs through every decision that Rob Manfred and his office makes, and that Rob Manfred and the owners and pretty much everybody other than the players. The line that runs through it is that they're more interested in other things than making baseball a more quality, enjoyable product.
Mm-hmm.
And one that is more it is undoubted, like there is no argument for games being better apart from maybe an ungodly amount of pinch hitting and strategy if you want to pull that card. There is no argument that not having a DH and having a pitcher hit instead is higher quality and more fun to watch. There's no argument for either side. I don't care what you say. There is no argument that for one of that's 11% of the batters. 11% of the batters just aren't going to swing. Just throw it right down the middle, and he literally, like, he's going to be incapable of hitting it. Just throw it hard down, right down the middle. That is, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you say. There is no argument, at least from my perspective, that a universal DH doesn't make the game more fun to watch. And baseball needs to make decisions based on, is the game more fun to watch? The game is not. Baseball is never in the news for the right reasons. Never, ever. And here we are again, where clearly we're more interested in what this chip might mean, and talking about a new collective bargaining agreement than actually what's happening on the field. It's very unsurprising for me because it makes sense based on what we know about Rob Manfred and his front office.
My slight counter argument, I generally agree with you, is that there is something beautiful about watching Bartolo Colon bat.
If he was still in the league, that'd be a point. That would be one.
Sure.
That would be one.
Okay,
like
I'll
one
give you
point
that.
in
If it was 2012, that would be the one reason that we could keep the DH. And you throw Carlos Zambrano in there, there as well. But that's
the
two guys.
The three pitchers that are actually interesting as hitters that exist in Major League Baseball. Right. And like you've pointed out multiple times before, Chris, it's not like this is an actual debate.
Oh no, the league is fine with it. They just want to use it as leverage.
Right. Nobody thinks this is not a butting of heads in terms of where the league needs to go and what needs to happen. It's just the league saying, well, we're not going to concede this to you, even though we agree. We're going to keep it in our back pocket and make you give up something you don't want for it. Instead of just working from a place of good faith and saying, okay, let's not fight about this that we actually agree on, and let's get to this figuring out how to deal with the stuff that we don't agree on.
Is that the pettiest thing that anybody has ever done in sports? It might be. I mean, it might be up there. It might be up there.
Yeah.
But and of course it goes to the point that the relationship between those two sides is like it might even be to the point where it's that it can't be fixed until Rob Manfred is no longer the commissioner of Major League Baseball. Or and maybe it's just a deeper thing with the owners, and the commissioner can't even fix it at this point. Because that's just having no faith in your relationship with the players. If you boil it down, that's what we're getting at here, is that we need something to bring to the table, because otherwise they have no reason. Otherwise, they're just not going to do something that they don't want to do because they don't feel like we have their best interest at hand. That's what that is as well, is that we need to bring something that they want to the table. Otherwise, we just don't have any leverage, because there's not any pre-existing leverage of, well, we have their best interest at hand and they have ours, at least to a certain extent, like it is in the NBA.
Right. Yeah, I do wonder about that. Is just with Manfred, how much it's him. I mean, I'm not trying to let him off the hook for anything. He's obviously done, things that I completely disagree with. But how much of it is him, and how much of it is the owners that he is, representing because there's owners who are used to a certain power
Sure.
dynamic in that league that's been in place for decades, and so they don't want to cede any
Yeah.
any ground at all in the relationship. So yeah, it's interesting. What do you have, Josh?
My movie, please, is very quick. It's just a. So, will someone explain to me why Trey Lance is so sought after? Super athletic, 6'4", 226. I understand why Trey Lance, from a look at him perspective, why he's.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy completed 192 passes, 93 passes in his college career. He played one season of FCS football, and he was very good. Don't get me wrong, he was very good. But he also has run for basically the same amount of attempts as he has pass attempts. Pass completions. And I genuinely don't understand what the attraction with and the same, maybe it's just something about North Dakota State, because the same thing we did the same thing with Carson Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand the attraction of quite frankly risking a top 5 pick on a quarterback that spent 1 year. Right, he didn't get to play his 2020 season. North Dakota State didn't play football in the fall, all of that, but they didn't get to play football in the fall. He's played one season of FCS football, and I just I needed to. I've been grappling with this because it doesn't make sense to me that a front. I don't care what the tape says, right? We're talking about a kid who is playing against FCS opponents. While he might be an NFL quality quarterback, the only tape you have on him is against FCS players and one season of FCS players. Believe me, I understand the whether it's the fact that he's 6'4", 226, whether it's the fact that he, threw for 28 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Like, the numbers that he does have are impressive. But at the same time, it just makes me sweat the thought of using a top 10 draft pick on a guy that's resume is not nearly as fledged out as I would like the resume of a top 10 pick to be. It's I really just want to talk about this phenomenon in the NFL draft where it's I can't decide what's the most important, because if resume is and what he's proven on the football field is the most important, then then Trey Lance isn't somebody that should be considered for right. I'm not gonna act like I have spent a ton of time watching Trey Lance film, and there are people in the NFL who get paid to do this, and clearly he's a consensus top guy. It doesn't add up to me, and I keep seeing, right, it's clearly a consensus because every single mock draft now has him somewhere in the top 10. And this most recent one that I saw on CBS Sports has him 4th, and four quarterbacks going in the first 4 overall. Because it includes the Eagles trading up to number 3 and all of these other things. In a mock trade from the Miami Dolphins. Whatever. But I wouldn't be spending my top 5 pick on somebody like that. It just fascinates me that this is just something that is done in the NFL draft. So I really am curious what you guys think, because it just, right, it's a little bit like taking Patrick Williams number 4 overall, except it's the most important position in sports.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of risk. That's a lot of risk to take in my eyes. I'm a little fascinated by that.
And this goes back to the point I was making after the Super Bowl about specifically the Panthers. Right, this idea that you're going to use your top 10 pick on Trey Lance as opposed to building a better team around Christian McCaffrey and Teddy Bridgewater, because Teddy Bridgewater is a good, not great NFL quarterback.
Sure. Teddy Two Gloves.
That part of it just doesn't make all that much sense to me unless you think this guy's a transcendent talent. But when you're picking quarterback 4, clearly everybody else think, or at least some teams think, 3 guys have a higher probability of being a transcendent talent than this guy. And the flip side, though, and sort of the interesting part of this is, because I'm generally with you, Josh. This is why I felt the way I did when the Bears took Trubisky and traded up for a guy that played, I think it was 13 games at North Carolina on an average football team. Now, that one went more as the way I thought it would. But it was the same concern I had about Josh Allen and the same concern I had about Carson Wentz. Right? Josh Allen very much fits into this prototype too. Massive arm, looks the part, played at Wyoming. Nobody really knows anything about him, and he's turned out to be a great NFL quarterback. And the other thing here is I just find it fascinating. If you think about in these past handful of drafts,
but
the best quarterbacks.
But real quick, but at the same time, Josh Allen played for 2 seasons. Right? Even Josh Allen has double the amount of reps at starting quarterback that Trey Lance does.
Sure.
So sorry.
And that's a good point. Is right. You're very much taking you're sort of combining Josh Allen and Mitch Trubisky, a 1-year starter plus the unknown factor. That's a valid point. But if you think about sort of from that Wentz Goff draft, Goff was not on a good college team. Wentz was playing at not the highest level. You look at some of the other top guys that have been taken, and the best quarterbacks to come out of there are Deshaun Watson, who everybody passed on because he wasn't your prototypical quarterback. He's not the biggest guy in the world, doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. Patrick Mahomes, who also had a very underwhelming career at Texas Tech, but was one of these raw potential kind of guys. It was a project. Lamar Jackson, who people were asking if he was even going to be able to be a quarterback, but he won a Heisman Trophy. And then you've got, your Joe Burrow, who was checked every box pretty much. But it's just interesting that there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. Some of these guys work out that are complete unknowns. And sometimes it's the guy who won a national championship or a Heisman Trophy that just was one of the best players in college football. There just seems to be no way to really tell how it's going to go, which I find interesting. And Tua is also an example where he was like the no-brainer the Alabama quarterback to take finally, and now you're talking about him potentially getting traded and the Dolphins giving up on him.
Yeah, there's this appeal of the unknown versus the known success and failures, known strengths and weaknesses. There's this idea of like, if he's relatively unknown and all the sample size is so small that all we've seen is upside, then we can just imagine that upside being tremendous, right? We haven't seen, it's not even just his situation, but just in general, right? If all you've seen is the sample size is so small and all you see is success, then you could build up the potential as high in your head as you want, and you don't have weaknesses in your head necessarily where you've seen evidence of X, Y, and Z weaknesses, versus you might have a guy who's more known, who's done it for more years, and their success, you might have a better idea of where they're going to place, where they're going to end up, fitting in, because their successes, their failures. So it's sort of this, like, do you take the guy who you, right, typically, right, I would think if I was, if I was a GM, I would want to not take that risk with the top 10 pick. But, there's this idea that, well, this guy who, this unknown guy, not unknown, but right, this small sample size guy who always seen as upside from, he could be as good as the number 1 pick. He could be as good as the number 2 pick. He could also be as good as the 50th pick. Like, so it's like, do you want to go with the range, or do you want to go with the guy who you think what you have?
And go ahead.
Oh, sorry, real quick. Daniel Jones is another example of just he played quarterback at Duke, and was basically what I expected him to be, which is a average to slightly below average NFL quarterback. It's just strange.
Well,
and also you have the other thing, you have Justin Fields too, who is the exact opposite of this. Right. The guy who's proven at the college level, competed in the national championship, all that.
Well, here's and this is just where I differ, and to a certain extent, why I guess I'm not a scout, because what Right. Odds are that Trey Lance will be an average NFL, or average or worse NFL quarterback, right? It's just hard to be a really good NFL quarterback. Being a top 7 quarterback in the NFL is something that, right, only it's just really hard, and the odds are not in your favor. That Trey Lance is going to be a franchise quarterback and also be one of the 6 best quarterbacks in the NFL for a 7-year stretch. That's just probably not going to happen. So most average quarterbacks, their effectiveness is dictated on the weapons around them, right?
Sure.
There's one guy in the college game who turned into a Heisman finalist when he had good weapons around him. And that's Mac Jones. In my, from my perspective, I'd rather have Mac Jones than Trey Lance, because I know exactly what Mac Jones can do with high quality. Right? Do I think Mac Jones will be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at any point in his career? No, probably not. But what I have seen him do is be really, really fantastic when he's got good weapons around him. When there's a running back in Najee Harris in the backfield that is really awesome, and he's got a couple of really high quality, he had the best wide receiving core in college football. But right, when he's got a guy like Devontae Smith and a Jalen Waddle, he's got a really solid receiving core around him. I've seen Mac Jones take advantage of the weapons around him in a way that to a certain extent blew me away. Right? I mean, he just was flawless all year. And right, maybe you go with the guy in Trey Lance that you feel like, right, especially with the top 10 pick, you go with the guy that you feel like has a better chance of being a top 5 quarterback when you have a pick like that. But at the same time, in my head, I would feel safer taking somebody like Mac Jones, who played at the highest level of college football, who we saw take complete advantage of the weapons around him. And if you're hoping for an average to slightly above average quarterback, somebody who's taking advantage of the weapons around him is really important. So just wanted to bring that up. Thank you for humoring me. We talked for 42 minutes about humoring me. Please, we'll take a quick break, come back. We'll do Super Bowls, favorite Super Bowls in the podium, best and most interesting. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.